Good morning and welcome to the AP Forum, and also welcome to those of you who are joining us on the webinar. My name is Gill, Hancock. I'm the Head of Professional Standards and Knowledge, and I'm here to do a presentation on the Competence Framework, second edition, along with my colleague Nick Olive, who's the Interim Chief Commercial Officer at APM. What we're going to be looking at today is why we needed to change the Competence Framework, and also some of the benefits of the changes and what those changes actually are. So why did we need to change? Well, the current framework has not been reviewed or updated since 2008. So there are an awful lot of organisations that are using the Competence Framework and getting some great benefit from it. But since 2008, the world of project management has moved on, and we need to make sure that actually the Competence Framework reflects those changes. The first edition of the Competence Framework was only relevant to project managers and not inclusive of the wider project management discipline. And since the first edition of the Competence Framework, the body of knowledge has been updated, which covers project, programme and portfolio management. And we needed to make sure that that coverage was also reflected in the Competence Framework content as well. We needed a resource that was fit for purpose for 21st century project professionals. So I was saying earlier that the world has moved on since 2008, and we needed to make sure the content that we have in the Competence Framework reflects what's needed in the profession, but also supports the profession in terms of growing and developing. We wanted to create a platform where we build our new proposition in line with our 2020 strategy vision, which is to create a world in which all projects succeed. To make sure that we can create that world and move towards that target, then we need to provide a competence framework that supports the development of project, programme, portfolio and PMO managers to make sure that project success becomes the norm. We also wanted to respond to our customer feedback. Since 2008, we've had a great deal of feedback around the Competence Framework, around what's good about it, what could be improved around it, and some of the changes we might need to make. Rather than just basing the update on that anecdotal feedback, we did actually undertake some extensive research consultation before we did any changes in the framework. And that research consisted of focus groups, telephone interviews, face-to-face meetings, and also online surveys as well. So those focus groups and telephone interviews focused on existing users of the Competence Framework, and what people thought of it, how they were using it, what the benefits of it were. But also we spoke to people who weren't using the framework to understand why they weren't using the framework and what changes we might need to make. We also employed an independent research company to do this on our behalf, so it was independent of APM staff. It's also keen to note that the Competence Framework is developed by the profession for the profession, so the consultation that took place was with a wide range of stakeholders, corporate organisations, training providers, universities, various people involved in the profession, and it has been developed by the profession and by an input from those organisations, and it's there for use for the profession. The research and consultation we did also confirmed the need to extend beyond project management to include programme and portfolio management, but also PMO roles, so we're covering off the competencies needed for each of those disciplines. The new framework also needed to recognise differences in job role and project complexity. One of the big pieces of feedback that we had is actually a lot of the competencies are similar in relation specifically to project and programme management, but it's the context and the complexity in which we're delivering those competencies that makes a difference. Also in relation to transitioning from one framework to the new framework is that it's going to take time, and we fully appreciate that. And in some cases the feedback we had is going to take as long as 24 months for some organisations to transition from edition 1 of the framework to edition 2, and we're here to support organisations in that transition and help organisations move to the new framework and to the new benchmarking that's available and achieve the benefits that this great product actually delivers. You also told us we need to make a number of changes to make the Competence Framework more effective, and we have very much taken those on board. And as we go through the changes to the Competence Framework, I'll highlight the differences that are there, but also why some of those changes have been made and the feedback that we were given that informed the changes to the framework. So what has actually changed? Well, we have an updated Competence Framework, and when we developed the Competence Framework, we didn't go in with any set ideas about whether it's going to be one Competence Framework that covered all the different roles, or whether it was going to be a number of different frameworks for each of the different disciplines. What came out through the feedback very strongly is that the competencies, particularly in project and programme management, are very, very similar. But as I was saying earlier, it's the complexity and the context in which we're applying them that's different. But also with portfolio management, there are some similarities in those competencies as well. There are some specific competencies that relate solely to portfolio management, and those have been included in the framework, but there weren't a significant number of those to justify having a separate competence framework for portfolio management itself. And again, with PMO competencies, then there were some similarities there in terms of the competencies they used across all the disciplines. So the approach that we've taken is actually to develop one base competence framework and then develop a number of role profiles that come out of that. So taking those relevant competencies for each of the roles and using a scoring matrix to define what those roles actually look like and profile those roles out. We do have a new rating scale. One of the big pieces of feedback that we had was actually the 0 to 10 scale in edition 1 of the competence framework was not as useful as it could be, and actually a shorter rating scale would be much more beneficial. So we now have a new rating scale of 1 to 5, and I'll go into that in more detail later on. And we also have new complexity guidance. Complexity is one of those areas that is quite subjective in terms of defining what the complexity is, and because each project programme portfolio is unique in its own right, to try and have a tool that defines what that complexity is becomes very, very complicated. So the complexity guidance is there in terms of pointers and things people might need to think about in terms of rating what the complexity of their change initiative, so their project programme or portfolio, and how complex that actually is. So the new competence framework itself is streamlined and easier to use. The number of competencies is reduced from 47 to 27. So although we've broadened the scope of what's covered in the competence framework, we have actually reduced the number of competencies that are there. And we've done this primarily by taking a functional approach to developing the competence framework. So that's looking at the functions and the things that need to take place for project programme and portfolio management to be effective. But we've also looked at getting rid of any duplication that was there in the in edition 1 of the competence framework, and we've also taken the competencies to a higher level. So we haven't gone down into the details of specific tools and techniques. So in edition 1 of the competence framework, for example, you will see a competence on earned value. In the second edition of the competence framework, what you will see is performance indicators about monitoring and controlling your projects or your change initiative using appropriate tools and techniques, of which earned value is one. So you could use earned value to demonstrate that particular competence and that particular performance indicator, but we haven't gone down into detail of the specific tools and techniques that are there. We have 14 role profiles matched to the new framework across project, programme, portfolio and PMO management. And it's also an editable framework which can be easily integrated into existing frameworks the organisations have, or used as an out-of-the-box solution. Again, part of the feedback that we received from doing the research and updating the competence framework was actually a number of organisations using sections of the competence framework and not using it in its entirety, which is absolutely fine. And what we've done is develop the new framework so it's a lot more editable, a lot more flexible, so it can be integrated more easily into those existing frameworks. But it can also be used in its entirety as an out-of-the-box solution. So the flexibility and the options are there in terms of its use. We're fully aware that a number of organisations are using the first edition of the competence framework, and we have also provided a mapping between edition 1 and edition 2, so people can see where the two editions map across each other. And we have also mapped it to the current edition of the IPMA ICB, the IPMA's International Competence Baseline. The ICB is also due to be changing later on this year, and as APM have been involved in the development of the ICB, then we do also have a mapping to the new version of the International Competence Baseline, and we'll release that once the new ICB has been made public. Okay. This slide contains an overview of the 27 competencies and the different competency areas, and I just wanted to highlight some of the specific competencies that exist in some of the role profiles. So, for example, asset allocation competence 25 is there specifically for the portfolio management roles, whereas there are others such as capability development that appear primarily in the program management roles, and there are others such as conflict management excuse me, that actually go across all of the role profiles. The other area I wanted to highlight was benefits management. Throughout the performance indicators in the competence framework, there is reference to benefits management, and that's an important thing because our thinking was that actually there's no point in doing any change initiative, a project programme or a portfolio if you're not going to achieve the benefits at the end of it. So there's a theme that runs through the entire framework. But there is also a separate competence on benefits management, and that's written from the point of view of a project programme, portfolio or PMO staff point of view rather than covering the whole of benefits management. So it is very, very specific to those roles. The competencies themselves are detailed in this format. So you have the competence heading, so in this case it's leadership. You then have a brief description of what that competence is, so it's the ability to empower and inspire others to deliver successful change initiatives. Change initiatives is a term that's used throughout the competence framework to relate to projects, programmes or portfolios, and it just meant we didn't have to repeat those three words throughout the competence framework, but they're looked at holistically as change initiatives. You then have a section of introductory notes. Whilst this isn't a direct lift from the body of knowledge was used as one of the documents to inform the development of the competence framework. So if you looked at those introductory notes and the body of knowledge content side by side, you would see the link between the two. You then have a series of performance indicators that are listed under application or knowledge. The application criteria are there in terms of how you actually apply that competence, and the knowledge performance indicators are there in terms of the supporting knowledge that you would need to deliver that competence effectively. We've moved away from the term experience to the term application, and again that came through from the feedback we had during the research phase, and the fact that people can have lots of experience over a 10-15 year period, but it could be bad experience. But what we're actually looking for is the application of those outcome statements that are documented there in each of the competencies. The approach that we're asking people to take in relation to the competence framework and the rating scale is, rather than score each of the individual performance indicators, is to take the new rating scale, which I said earlier is from 1 to 5, and look at all of the application performance indicators and make a decision holistically against all those performance indicators, and then looking at the rating scale as well to see where you'd rate yourself, and then again do the same for the knowledge. So if you're going to score yourself across all 27 competencies, you have to score yourself 54 times, which is very different to the competence framework where you can be scoring yourself 750 times. So although the time taken to complete the self-assessment on the competence framework is less, the results that come out are still valid and still very, very beneficial. One of the other big things to point out in terms of the rating of the competence framework is, in addition, one of the competence framework, we are looking at averaging some scores in relation to the performance indicators. We've moved away from that in this edition of the competence framework. As again, what came out through the research is if you're averaging those scores, you can be very good at one aspect of project management and be quite bad at another, but when you average it out, it comes out to be okay. So some of those areas of development were being missed. We've moved away from that in terms of this edition of the competence framework, so you are actually rating yourself and you can then compare that to the role profile that's made available. So the role profiles themselves, they're relevant to all project professionals. We've developed 14 new role profiles. We've got 4 project manager ones, 3 program, 3 portfolio and 4 PMO role profiles. And these have been developed specifically to demonstrate what the professional body view is of the competencies that people performing at these areas should be exhibiting. Okay. They can be used by individuals to understand how they compare against their current role and also potential future roles as well, so it can aid career development and pathways from there. And the gaps identified can be used to create support and training development solutions and form an integral part of the professional development process. So the whole point of this competence framework is it can underpin professionalism within project management, but also help with the career development and moving people between the 4 disciplines, but also helping people develop in their careers. So the key benefits of the change: it's a modern framework that can be used as it is or integrated into an organisation's existing framework. There are clearly defined competencies with easily measured outcome-focused performance indicators. When you look at the performance indicators in detail, you'll see it's very easy to say whether or not you've achieved that and whether or not you've got the evidence to demonstrate that. It's a trusted professional body view in terms of where people should be performing if they're saying that they're a professional project manager, program manager, portfolio manager, or working within a PMO environment. As a professional body, we're standing up and being counted and saying this is our view of what the competencies people should be exhibiting, and if they are exhibiting these, then they will have greater success in terms of the project delivery. It also provides an effective benchmarking tool for organisations to use. So having looked at the competencies within organisations, you then have a benchmarking tool to compare that to from the professional body. Also enables project professionals to identify their strengths and development needs, enables organisations to establish, embed and measure effective project management skills, and it facilitates the movement between the 4 project professional disciplines. So you've got project management, program management, portfolio and also PMO. And one of the big things is looking at the commonalities in terms of those competencies, but also there is no requirement if you're going into portfolio management to have been a project or a program manager beforehand. So it's looking at how those competencies interrelate with each other and how people can develop their careers and move forward from there. At this point, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Nick, who's going to talk you through how accredited providers should use the new framework and then some of the marketing communication side of things that we're doing from here on in.
Thanks, Jill, and hello. I'm going to talk briefly about the new licensing arrangements that we've developed. There are not massive changes, but in 2 respects we have decided to develop the licensing approach a little bit. The intention is to better reflect your needs, and so all the familiar parts of what are included in the license remain there. And our BDMs, who are well known to yourselves, will be there to help you understand the new approaches. There are basically two new license forms. There is what we call a restricted license and what we call an extended license. In short, restricted license is for those of you who will be using the competence framework, if you like, within your organisation, maybe for training staff or maybe for assessing candidates for qualifications. Those of you who have different business models and who use the competence framework more as a consultancy tool will choose the extended license relationship because that will be more appropriate to you. You don't have to action this change right away, but because we will integrate it with your normal licensing arrangements and with your normal renewal arrangements. But we do think it's worth moving to this new framework as quickly as you can, because we think there are such strong advantages to it. So let me talk briefly about the marketing and communications program that we have put together, and is starting now this week, and this webinar is part of that communication. So new documentation is available to all current license holders now. New web pages are available in the project management tab on the APM website, and you will also find there an FAQ to help you with some of the questions. If it's not there, please ask us to add the question and get your right answer. As of next week, we will start into a program that will go through the summer months of themed promotion and themed communication around the application, the usage of the competence framework. And you can see from the slide a range of communication devices that will roll through the next couple of months, talking to different audiences, be it the public sector, or be it major corporates, or maybe or also yourselves as accredited training providers to relate the story of the competence framework to your situation. So, just to wrap up, how does all of this support APM's future plans? Well, essentially, we feel that we have designed and developed a platform for all of the products and services that were included in the development pathway that lead to RPP. We've created a platform also that we feel underpins the structure and the syllabus for new qualifications currently in development. And it also sits there to underpin the CPD, wider career development, and in that format is a special support to the work that you do. So, to wrap up, what do we need from yourselves? What we need is for you to review all the documentation that you can now see, to read through that and feedback any comments you have. Let us know what you think and what new opportunities it may create. Let us know if you would like to be and to put together a case study of your own, or you're aware of a client or a corporate who may want to embark on this and develop one with us. And finally, if you have any questions at all, please put them to your business development manager. They're there and they're continuing to work with you, and they're very eager to support you in making the very most from this new competence framework. Thank you very much.